Hello everyone. In this class we are going to talk about the Holocaust. I want to begin by giving some background information on anti-Semitism in general, anti-Semitism in Germany a bit more specifically, and then understand how that led to mass murder at the hands of the Nazis during the Second World War. So I just want to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism more broadly first before we focus on the Holocaust specifically. There's been kind of evidence again of a hatred towards Jews across European history for a variety of different reasons at a variety of different times. And it would be kind of tempting to view this kind of anti-Semitism as this kind of unchanging, constant force in Western thought. But in reality, the reason different people hated Jews kind of varied from place to place and time to time. And I want to give you kind of some kind of sense in that. So when we talk about anti-Semitism in the medieval sense kind of meant something different from anti-Semitism in the modern sense. That even though they are broadly similar phenomenon, that it involves hatred of the Jews, and it oftentimes the motivation came from a very different place. So we do have a long history, recorded history of hostility towards the Jews, even dating back to the ancient world. There is pretty significant evidence that both the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans had very negative opinions of the Jews, and I think what marks the Jews out, certainly in the world of antiquity before the coming of Jesus Christ, was firstly the monotheism of Jews. That is, the Jews from about 1500 years before the birth of Christ had been, or maybe a little sooner than that, maybe about 1,000 years from the birth of Christ, had been progressing more and more clearly towards monotheism. That is the worship of a single God. And obviously Christianity derives its monotheism from Judaism. That made them quite different from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, who tended to worship multiple gods, multiple deities. Although it wasn't so much the monotheism of the ancient Jews and that kind of riled up the Greeks and Romans. It was their kind of unwillingness to kind of blend religion with other forces they came across and to kind of mix and match their religions, as the Greeks and Romans did. The Greeks and Romans were quite willing to borrow religious ideas from one another, and sometimes to kind of pretend they worshipped another religion when it was politically expedient. The obvious example of this is the Roman pantheon of pagan gods. Essentially they took the entire Greek pantheon, changed the names, and went from there. So it wasn't just the monotheism of Jews that seemed to upset the Greeks and Romans. It was their insistence that their faith was the correct one, everything else was wrong and backwards, and that there could be no compromising ever on principles of faith, because that kind of went against the religious views of the Greeks and Romans, who in some ways were kind of more open to different ideas, different changes, and evolution of religion. In medieval times in Europe, we certainly have very obvious examples of anti-Semitic behaviour. Many medieval Christians were very, very hostile to Jews, and this often led to pogroms or massacres against Jews across the medieval period. The motivation for this seems to come from two different strands. One was the Christianity of the medieval Christians, in that initially in church thinking, Jews were not ultimately held responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. Obviously, Jesus Christ himself was Jewish. But by the turn of the millennium, Christian thought had increasingly come to consider the Jews as the enemies of Christianity, as the people who were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. And this image on the screen here is a medieval depiction of the arrest of Jesus Christ prior to his crucifixion. And obviously you see the difference here between Jesus Christ himself, who was very kind of Western European features, and these kind of stereotypical Jewish depictions, especially with these large hooked noses, even though of course Jesus himself would have been from the exact same ethnic background as the Jews who were arresting him. He himself was Jewish. But so why did medieval Christians hate Jews? Partly because they held Jews responsible for the death of Jesus Christ, but there was also economic reasons. The philosophers, Christian thinkers in medieval times, were adamant that you could not loan money to make a profit, because the Bible in many ways is quite clear that to make profit from a loan, what is known as usury. Today we say usury means to make excessive profit, but traditionally it meant making any profit from lending money. but that usury was wrong. So lending money was considered to be forbidden for Christians. Jews did not share this view of usury, and therefore were able to make careers as money lenders. But of course, that also meant that because they were the only people who were able to lend money, they often were resented by the Christians. As happens, if you owe someone money and they're looking for that money back, that can oftentimes produce resentment on the part of that person. So it was a combination of religious hatred and economic motivations as well. Even during the Enlightenment, we see, for all this move towards progress, that there was considerable anti-Semitism amongst various groups. Napoleon was an example of someone who tried to move away from that. Under the states that fell under his control, he broadly practiced religious toleration. In fact, Napoleon set up a council with the Jews of Europe in 1807 to discuss with them how they could be kind of loyal citizens within his empire. But after the defeat of Napoleon, many of the German states that had been conquered by Napoleon during his wars returned to kind of restrictions that they placed upon Jews. Oftentimes that meant in some states that Jews had to live in ghettos. They were not allowed to mix with the Christian community. Other times that meant they had to wear certain insignia marking out their difference from the Christian population. In some cases, it meant they weren't allowed to own property in certain parts of the city. And another restriction oftentimes was that Jews were not allowed to come out on Sunday because that was the Christian day of worship. The legal position of Jews improves after 1870, after the unification of Germany, after the development of a new German state. But German unification takes place in a moment of heightened nationalism. And that moves into a new reason why the Jews are kind of disliked, not so much because of their religious differences, not so much because of their economic position, but now in the age of ethnic nationalism, the idea is that all nations share a common blood. The Jews, because of their ethnic difference, are considered to be not racially compatible in the language of the time with the nations they are living in. So the Jews, so we see anti-Semitism take a new direction. And it's the fact that the Jews, even though they might have lived in some of these countries for centuries, are seen as outsiders, are seen as ultimately incompatible with the racial makeup of the nation. So, and that's anti-Semitism from ancient times up until late 19th, early 20th century. Of course, it's going to be altered further under the Nazis. So Hitler himself had a very hostile attitude towards the Jews, although there is a great deal of debate about where exactly this anti-Semitism came from. In some of Hitler's earlier writings, it seems that he disliked socialism, but had not fixated on Jews in particular. There have been certain theories that perhaps his mother or his father had been Jewish, and Hitler had been born illegitimate to a Jewish father who abandoned his mother, and that possibly created his anti-Semitism, although most historians don't accept that. But what is clear, by the time Hitler was writing Mein Kampf, his autobiography Mein Struggle in 1925, that he is blaming the Jews for all of Germany's problems. Basically, his two core arguments are that Jewish identity is undermining the racial purity of the German people, and also that communism is essentially a Jewish plot against Western civilization, and therefore Jews, for two different reasons, need to be removed from Germany to protect the nation or the ethnic purity of the Germans. And so his tactic was a common tactic we see with a lot of kind of dictators or despots. Find an enemy. Unfortunately, in the human psyche, there seems to be something where we are hardwired to hate others. We are hardwired to see the world in a kind of dichotomy of us against them. And Hitler kind of tapped into that by insisting that all of the problems of Germany were because of the Jews. If only the Jews were no longer there, all of Germany's problems would be solved. You oftentimes see something very similar to an anti-immigrant sentiment in many countries, the idea that human beings on some psychological level are hardwired to accept that there's them out there who are a danger to us, and we need to do something about that them, whatever it is. So on seizing power in 1933, the Nazis very quickly forced all German Jews out of government jobs. So Hitler's program against the Jews, Hitler himself is kind of ambiguous what exactly his plan was, but basically it was that the less Jews in Germany, the better. The more that could be done to discourage the Jews to leave Germany, the better. So as soon as the Nazis seized power in 1933, German Jews are forced out of government jobs, that is jobs where the government pays the wages for them. Historians have noted that the Nazi hatred I'll take that back, that the German hatred of Jews, which had existed, Hitler did not invent anti-Semitism in Germany, had existed long before he came along, but that it was a mix of a couple of different things. On the one hand, it was religious, and we talked about religion already, that various Protestant and Catholic groups saw the Jews as outsiders and oftentimes still held them responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. There was a class element to this. Many German Jews were from Eastern Europe, had migrated into Germany, especially because of Russian pogroms that took place against Jews in the early 20th century. And they were oftentimes poor, oftentimes didn't speak German, and so wealthier Germans in particular were kind of disgusted by these outsiders who looked different, who spoke differently, who weren't as well off as them. And then there was racial prejudice, that ethnic nationalism, the sense of nations being defined by their bloodlines, had gained increasing prominence over the second half of the 19th century. And obviously Hitler was someone who was absolutely fixated on that idea of the Jews as being racially incompatible with the Germans. But he was tapping into a mindset that already existed in the minds of many Germans about why the Jews were not compatible with German identity. The Nazis initially attempted to enforce boycotts of Jewish businesses in order to economically weaken the Jews, and therefore in their minds hopefully encourage the Jews to emigrate. These were not particularly successful. Many Jews in a lot of towns, the major store or the major or the money lender in town was often Jewish, and therefore there was a kind of a necessity for people to work with Jewish business owners, but that only further enrages the Nazis in that sense. In 1936, all Jews are banned from all professions, so doctors, lawyers, professors, etc. In 1937, Jews are banned from even attending university, and in 1938, the government outlaws any contracts with even Jewish businesses as a way of trying to discourage the Jews from making a living in Germany, from being economically self-sufficient, and in the Nazi mind, encouraging the Jews to leave. So it's worth bearing in mind. I'll finish this last point really quickly. We'll talk about it more again in the next couple of clips. But that in the beginning, Hitler's plan was not necessarily to murder the Jews. It was to force them to leave, to make things as uncomfortable as possible for the Jews in order to basically make them not want to live in Germany and to leave as a result. And in our next video, we're going to look at some of the other laws that the Germans brought in, specifically to create a legal sense of difference between Germans and Jewish Germans living in the Third Reich.